Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. And another heavyweight news and note smash-up video today, starting with Tyson Fury and some backlash, and later on some bad news for Arslanbek Makhmudov. But first off, when Tyson Fury said that Oleksandr Usyk was
a little steroid man,
and I'll play that again,
a little steroid man,
you knew there was going to be a backlash of some sort from somewhere, not just fans. And it's Wladimir Klitschko who's bitten, saying at Tyson Fury, you live in a glass house and someone needs to take away your stones. Wasn't actually long before our fight where you actually tested positive. Anyone can Google it. Keep it classy. And a bunch of hashtags, hashtag Usyk champion, hashtag Ukraine, hashtag hypocrite, and atting people as well, including Boxing Scene and Oleksandr Usyk himself. And not to be outdone, Tyson Fury fighting back via social media saying, you useless dosser, at Vladimir Klitschko. Klitschko is another Ukrainian dosser, dreaming that Usyk could do something to a man like me. I specialize in flattening dossers. And now the clip.
Vladimir, you've got some cheek to come back after all these years and open your big mouth. You never landed a punch. I took all your belts off you. Look, these used to belong to you, mush. Now they belong to me. You useless dosser. Keep on dreaming.
And Fury again following up with another post on social media saying, at Bronze Bomber, at Klitschko, explaining the current heavyweight division to non-boxing people is a real treat. So yeah, the guy in the middle beat the other two, and And actually, that's quite a good post, because obviously Fury being a little bit more rotund than the statuesque Deontay Wilder and Wladimir Klitschko. Of course, Fury beat Wladimir Klitschko in 2015, Deontay Wilder a couple of times at 2020 and 2021. But Tyson Fury, obviously a little bit, I mean, he was trying to bait something out of somewhere. Probably Oleksandr Usyk, trying to get in his head, trying to build some sort of beef for a potential fight down the line. Maybe. We'll have to see what happens. Undisputed has been some sort of unicorn that we just haven't been able to attain in a generation. So I'm a little bit sort of skeptical it's happening in 2022. Open to it, of course, would love it. But Tyson Fury, who knows who he's going to fight next. If it will be Dillian Whyte or an interim fight, that chapter will play out. But Vladimir Klitschko not happy. And of course, he is right. Tyson Fury did fail a test. And there was actually one or two people who said it was cocaine, not nandrolone. But I would encourage you, do a little Google search, just type in UKAD Tyson Fury settlement, and that will take you to the UKAD page where it talks about UKAD and Tyson Fury, Huey Fury, issuing a joint statement basically to bring to a close the action between UKAD and those two parties. And UKAD did find in a test metabolites from nandrolone. It's indisputable. For those saying it was cocaine, he might have been taking cocaine, but what they were chasing him for was nandrolone. That's just indisputable. Anyway, moving on. So Eddie Hearn has sort of stoked the fires for a potential fight between PhilipHergerich and Tony Yoka. As we know, Tony Yoka has been ordered to face Hrgovic for an IBF final eliminator. We haven't heard if he's accepting publicly, but Hearn did say that he was told Tony Yoka does want to accept the fight with PhilipHergerich as an IBF final eliminator, and said they've started speaking to Top Rank about making it happen. Whether this is just Hearn talking BS and raising our expectations, well, that's possible. Whether it's real, well, if it happens, I think many of us would be overjoyed that PhilipHergerich and Tony Yoka have been needing a really good step-up fight. This would be a great fight for them to have. The winner guaranteed a title shot, maybe in a year or so, somewhere there or thereabouts. But given it's come from Eddie Hearn, and he can be very unreliable on these things, he could just be setting us up here, playing with our boxing heartstrings, and it doesn't happen. Remembering, Tony Yoka was scheduled to face Martin Bakole. The fight was postponed, and we've had Billy Nelson, Bacole's trainer, saying it's going to be rescheduled for March. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happens either. Moving on, so Derek Chisora is still chasing a fight with Deontay Wilder if he can get it. He still wants it, and he believes it's something that any boxer with ambition should want to do, fight the best of his generation, saying, I want to be that guy that when I sit down and everybody looks at my resume, I want to say, you know what, I fought everybody in my era. So if I have to fight Deontay Wilder, if I have to fight whoever, if I have to fight an American, I don't care. I will fight. And Derek Chisora coming off a second consecutive loss to Joseph Parker. This was this past December, saying that he's not ready for retirement yet. His promoter Eddie Hearn has talked about wanting to set up a Deontay Wilder fight next for Chisora, but his trainer, Chisora's trainer, has said he's not interested and wouldn't train Chisora for that fight. But in respect of potential opponents, if not a Deontay Wilder, Eddie Hearn has mentioned other PBC heavyweights in Chris Arreola or Luis Ortiz. So saying, what I like Arreola for Chisora, and I like Luis Ortiz. I like Zhang Zhilei. And I like a lot of these fights where Chisora has a great chance, and we're putting together some plans with 258 for his next fight in April, and 258 being his management company. I guess the one issue that I have with throwing out names, 1 Deontay Wilder, 2 Luis Ortiz, and 3 Chris Arreola, they're not in Hearn's promotional stable. And he's thrown out a lot of these names recently. In particular, Chris Arreola, his name is getting thrown out like candy. But there's been no fights involving Arreola in Matchroom Fighters getting made. So just throwing out these American heavyweights, which you have no control over, who typically within PBC in-house fights, and it stays in-house. I mean, the only realistic fight out of those 3 that he named is Zhang Zhilei. And potentially he could be in line for Filip Hrgovic, but we will see. But Zhang and Chisora, if that got made, actually that's a step up for Zhang. And it's, you know, that sort of gatekeeper situation. If Zhang was going anywhere, he'd have to beat Chisora. But we shall see. I mean, it's probably not going to be any of those names. Meanwhile, another British heavyweight, Fraser Clark, wants to be a heavyweight champion within 5 years. And so his promoter too is saying that they want to make that happen. So Ben Shalom saying Joe Joyce is the easiest to compare. He's an obvious comparison. Fraser will have to move as quickly as Joe, who is now 35, and in world title contention. Well, actually, Joyce is a little bit older than that, actually. By the time Fraser is 35, we'd be very disappointed if he hasn't already got a world title fight. He will have to move quickly in the next few years, but also carefully. So trying to follow a Joe Joyce route there. But is that really the best comparison? Because Joyce has been pro since 2017. It's 2022. No title shot at the moment. Maybe not one this year either. And when you consider the likes of Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker had world titles around their waists after being pro for 3 and 4 years respectively. It's food for thought. But it's a congested heavyweight division. You got to say that there's a lot of guys ahead of a lot of guys for title shots these days. But of Joe Joyce, so Frank Warren talking to the BBC when he was asked about, well, what about a rematch with Daniel Dubois, obviously in the same stable, saying the rematch is on our radar, but it's pointless to be doing that when both Joyce and Dubois are in number 1 positions. And Daniel Dubois, number 1 in the WBA. Joe Joyce, number 1 in the WBO. Joyce also highly rated elsewhere as well. He continues, it's always a good fight between Joe Joyce and Daniel Dubois, and it's always there, and it always will be better next time round because it'll be in front of a live audience. These guys will be in a world title fight one way or another, either against Tyson Fury or someone else. They're in an extremely strong position. That's why it doesn't quite make sense to do Joyce versus Dubois 2 right now. But when they do fight each other, they'll have much more experience. It could be a stadium fight. And I guess of the mention of a fight against Tyson Fury, is Tyson Fury going to fight Daniel Dubois or Joe Joyce anytime soon as a voluntary or a mandatory? Not so sure about that, at least not in 2022 would be my guess. But maybe Joyce is probably the closest to getting a shot at Tyson Fury, a bigger name I think than Daniel Dubois, and actually probably a better chance of beating him. Joe Joyce with that juggernaut type engine, and he can move, he can box, he can fight to a plan as we saw against Dubois, but still Tyson Fury would go in favourite at this point. Some disappointing news for Arslanbek Makhmudov. So he had been scheduled to fight January the 22nd versus Mariusz Wach in Canada, in Montreal. but it has been postponed, or rescheduled, should I say. So it's now going to be happening on the 19th of February. And look at this promo poster. This must be a photo of Mariusz Wach from about 10 years ago. But anyway, so just to the translation, a couple of things. So this is, of course, down to rising cases of COVID, as the translation says. Measures from the local government, etc. So they're postponing it to January the 22nd. They've also got some other backup cards on other dates, different things that they're rescheduling. Interestingly as well, it actually mentions Simon Kean, who's stablemate of Arslanbek Makhmudov, is going to be facing Shawndell Winters. So I'd only checked a couple of days ago, it's still TBA, and look, it was the 22nd of January, they hadn't had an opponent, but Winters versus Kean is actually pretty interesting, because Simon Kean has looked like a deer in the headlights since he was knocked out by Dylan Carmen a few years ago. Hasn't looked good, hasn't looked sturdy, has looked unable to pull the trigger. So Winters could actually really be in that fight. So it's going to be a sort of a litmus test for where Simon Kean is really at. But for Makhmudov, it's a shame, because obviously he could have moved on here and then on to something bigger and better a little bit sooner. Wach, he's going to roll through him, maybe this will go some rounds, but I'm expecting the seasoned Mariusz Wach, who's about 40 years old now, to effectively get a pasting in this one. It's just going to be a little bit later than initially anticipated. Solomon Dacres, who's just got a few pro fights under his belt, is looking towards the likes of Fabio Wardley and also Alen Babic. And you can see here in this sort of post on Twitter, I'm a different level. Solomon Dacres believes he has the skills to show Alen Babic what a true heavyweight can do. And Dacres is managed by S-Jam Boxing. So the graphic, it says here, he's got the heart of a heavyweight, but I'm a different level of heavyweight. I'll show it in the ring. And Dacres did show us in 2021 that he's got some skills, beating Kamil Sokolowski handily enough, but that's at a certain level. But albeit he was injured to some degree, recently had surgery on one of his shoulders. So we'll see what happens, but I don't expect that fight to happen. But I like the ambition from Dacres. And rounding out this heavyweight news and notes mashup video, so Fernely Feliz Jr. has reflected on a second pro fight, getting a stoppage against Cleveland Billingsley, the third in the first round, saying, "I felt amazing in there. I felt like it was a perfect performance. This time I wanted to let my hands go and show my speed. I felt like last time I was thinking too much. It was my first fight, so I was being extra careful. Today I wanted to show my hand speed, and it worked out perfectly." So advancing to 2-0, the former top US amateur. He also says of upcoming sort of thoughts on the what next. "I'm weighing at 215, so I want to put on some more weight. Skill-wise, I'm always learning, but I want some more muscle. I wasn't feeling the strength of my last opponent, but when I start fighting the really bigger guys, it could be a different story if I don't gain some size." What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.